Now last week when we reviewed the PROTON X70 Premium, we spoke about its strengths and the fact that it is a very appealing car for the money. But the thing is, it's very easy to say that when you're talking about the flagship variant of any given model. Instead, the slightly more difficult task is identifying the value buy, the best value proposition within the lineup. Although that said, I think we've found it here. This is the PROTON X70 Executive, still powered by the same 1.5 litre blown triple up front with a 7-speed DCT in the middle, but this is the middle of the pack car. So, has it cut out a little bit too much, reducing the X70 to just another SUV, or does it retain enough strengths that we saw from the X70 Premium to still be a worthy contender? Well, before we get into it, be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every time we make a new upload. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, the PROTON X70 Executive. So, at the front of the X70 Executive, same. At the back of the X70 Executive, same. On the side, almost same, because now we have 18-inch alloy wheels on this Executive wrapped in GT Radial Severo tyres. Otherwise, same. On the inside, not same. Because now, instead of Nappa leather that you get in the Premium or the fabric that you get in the Standard, the Executive comes with black faux leather. But at least it does have white contrast stitching and this little bit of red piping, which I think looks quite nice. The sound system is also almost the same, but it's lost the Kenwood branding and the subwoofer, which means it is slightly worse. However, at least you still get an electric driver's seat and you get ventilation for the two front seats, although this front passenger seat is now manual, which is a little bit of a shame. In terms of other technology features, well, you still get dual zone climate control, you still get the same GKUI system, the same digital instrument cluster, so overall, it really isn't all that bad. You certainly don't feel like you're downgrading from one of the other models if you're sitting in the Executive. But, you know, it doesn't have the ADAS features. That you'll notice quite quickly. In fact, it's when you drive that you notice the biggest difference. So, shall we? The thing about the PROTON X70 Executive all-wheel drive is that this is a model that was brought back due to demand, mostly from Sabah and Sarawak. So what we've got is the same 1.5 litre turbo 3-cylinder that we see in the rest of the X70 range, as well as the PROTON X50, and it produces a little bit less power and a little bit less torque than the 1.8 litre. And that is paired to a 7-speed dual clutch automatic, and it sends power to all four wheels. Now, talking about the all-wheel drive system, it's worth noting this is not a permanent all-wheel drive system. This is very much an on-demand type of thing. And so when the car figures out that there is a demand for power at the rear, then the X70 will figure it out and send power rearwards. Now, not having a permanent all-wheel drive system does have a few benefits. Firstly, it is a lot more fuel efficient because it's not driving all four wheels all the time. Now, some may argue that the fuel savings there are relatively minimal, and that is somewhat true. But that said, the downside of not having permanent all-wheel drive is that you don't get that permanent sense of security. I personally like all-wheel drive vehicles because as I drive them around, I know the fact that I have a lot of traction available to me, especially when it rains. Anyone who knows how I drive knows that I slow down properly in the rain. I will sit in the left lane and do a reasonable speed because I don't want to aquaplane, which is what everyone else should do, really. But in any case, when I have an all-wheel drive vehicle, like a Subaru, for example, with the symmetrical all-wheel drive system, I know that the system is looking out for me, and because I always have all-paw traction, I know that I'm less likely to find myself in an untoward situation. But that said though, most X70 buyers will be slightly more concerned with running costs, and as a result, this is perhaps the best all-wheel drive setup for this car. Now, in terms of the way it drives, the X70 Executive is a pretty good car to have. Yes, it doesn't have the Nappa leather upholstery, and yes, it doesn't have the nicer leather steering wheel that you get from the Premium. But that said, it's still a very comfortable place to be. The 18-inch alloy wheels on this car, for example, does a very, very good job at soaking up lumps and bumps really, really well. And as a result, you have a very isolating driving experience. The same goes with noise, vibration, and harshness. We've covered the vibration part. So in terms of noise, you don't get that much wind intrusion, especially when you're driving at higher speed. Although you do get a little bit more road roar in this car compared to the Premium, because the Premium runs on Continental Ultra Contact 6 tires, whereas the tires on this car are not quite as highly spec'd, and so they do result in a little bit more rolling resistance. That said, however, you still get an electric driver's seat, although it's manual adjustment for the passenger, and most importantly, you still get seat ventilation, which I think is a really important feature, particularly in our market. The other thing that you don't get over the Premium is the full driver assist suite. So you don't get adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, and so on. And to me, I feel like that does detract from this ever so slightly, especially given the fact that the PROTON X50 flagship comes with all of these bells and whistles. So this X70 really ought to come with it as well. But if you remove that from the equation, what you get is a honest, reliable, well-packaged, high-value SUV. For the amount of money that you're paying for this, be it the Executive or the Executive all-wheel drive, you are no doubt getting a lot of car for your money, and you are getting a lot of features for your money, especially in terms of the NVH levels, because the X70 is a fantastically comfortable car. If you'd like to know a little bit more, you'd like me to speak in further detail about the comfort of the X70, you can check out our Premium review right here in the corner. So overall, this is a pretty decent package. The only other difference between the two cars is, of course, fuel consumption. So because this does run a part-time all-wheel drive system, there are instances where the rear-wheel drive does kick in, and as a result, naturally, you're driving two more wheels, so it will consume a little bit more fuel. To that end, we've driven this car almost 1,000 kilometers, a lot of which was done in a KL to Ipoh run. You can check out Shasha's video of that up here in the corner if that's already out, and if it isn't, there's nothing that's going to appear in the corner. But in any case, she drove this car to Ipoh and back, and she drove it quite reasonably, and then we've taken over from that. And throughout this entire experience of almost 1,000 kilometers, this car has been returning an average of 10.7 liters per 100 kilometers. Now, if you compare that to the two-wheel drive Premium that I've been driving around, that car returned at the end of our test about 10.2, and that car was driven in eco mode almost 90% of the time. Now, this car, I'm told, was driven in normal while Shasha had it, and throughout our test with it, we've been trying to drive it in eco as much as possible to bring down that fuel consumption figure, but unfortunately 10.7 is the best we've got. Now, if you compare that to, say, the Subaru Forester with its all-wheel drive, permanent all-wheel drive system, plus its slightly larger body compared to the XV, that is actually about what you'd expect within this segment. This is competitive in terms of fuel consumption. But if you compare it to two-wheel drive competitors like, say, Honda's CR-V, then the fuel consumption does fall short somewhat. But you can't compare an all-wheel drive vehicle to a two-wheel drive vehicle, because naturally the two-wheel drive vehicle will be more frugal. So that's not entirely fair. Comparing it apples to apples to other all-wheel drive vehicles, the X70 does exactly as expected, which is kind of nice because we're very familiar with this engine being a little bit thirsty. So it's nice to see this engine do as it's expected to do, rather than worse than it's expected to do. So overall, what do I think about this car? Well, I appreciate the fact that Proton brought this back as a result of customer demand, because it means that Proton listens to its customers, especially those in Sabah and Sarawak who feel more need for this all-wheel drive system rather than customers out here in the Peninsula. And although the fuel economy could be improved, 10.7 is really not that bad. I think it can be improved further with a little bit more frugal driving, for example, but we try to drive as realistically as possible, and this is the fuel consumption that you're going to get. As far as I'm concerned, I think that the X70 is a fantastic candidate for electrification. We understand that Proton is working on electrified powertrains. They're looking to introduce a mild hybrid in the relatively near future, and I feel that the X70 with its fuel consumption issues would benefit hugely from having a mild hybrid system, because this engine would allow, a mild hybrid engine rather, would allow this car to be even more frugal and perhaps bring that fuel consumption figure down to match a lot of its contemporaries, because as it stands, it is still a little bit on the thirsty side. However, in terms of refinement and comfort, the X70 continues to stand a step above a lot of its competitors. And as a result, it means that it is a car that can be very easily recommended not only to people buying within this segment, but also to people buying, for example, compact executive luxury cars, because again, this is a very impressive machine. Would I recommend one? Absolutely. But I would ask that you consider whether or not you really need all-wheel drive in your life. If you don't, you'll be better served by the regular executive two-wheel drive, because that is ultimately more frugal, and with fewer moving parts, it should be more reliable and more affordable to maintain in the long run. However, if you do a lot of motorway cruising and you prefer having the security of knowing that you've got all-port traction when you need it, particularly when you're traversing slightly more difficult terrain or when you're going through slightly more challenging weather, then the PROTON X70 Executive all-wheel drive is very easy to recommend. This is not a performance all-wheel drive vehicle, unlike what some YouTubers might tell you, so you should consider this as more of a safety net vehicle. If you like the safety net of all-wheel drive, then this is the car for you. However, if you're not paranoid like me and you don't mind driving a two-wheel drive vehicle over longer distances and are therefore more concerned with fuel economy, please consider the Peugeot 3008 and 508, as both of those cars run the same 1.6 litre turbocharged 4 cylinders, which have proven to be very, very frugal over a long highway run. Or if you want to look like everyone else in the segment and you have no interest in standing out, consider the Honda CR-V, because the 1.5 litre turbocharged engine in that has been known to be very, very frugal and very, very good on fuel, but reliability and long-term usability might be a bit of a concern. Anyway, that's been our review of the new PROTON X70 Executive all-wheel drive. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, jangan bodoh.
What?